Okay, so this is a key to the factoring number 5 worksheet. So it's basically topic 9 in the worksheet called factoring number 5. So number 1, you want to factor each of these polynomials. And number 1, you have a to the 11th power times b to the 4th minus 5a to the 9th b cubed plus 7a to the 6th b to the 8th. And the first thing you want to do when factoring any polynomial is to find the GCF. And so in this case, if you look at the coefficients first, that's a 1, this is a -5, and that's a +7. So the GCF of 1, -5, and 7 is 1. So I'm not going to put the 1 because I know that I'm going to have variables in the GCF as well. So if you look at the variables a, I have 11 factors of a here, I have 9 factors of a here, and I have 6 factors of a here. So remember, when dealing with variables, you're going to factor out your GCF will include the variable raised to the smallest exponent. So that's 11 factors of a, 9 factors of a, 6 factors of a, so you're going to use 6 factors of a. With regards to the factors of b, since there's a b in every term, you will have a b, at least one factor of b in the GCF. We just have to determine how many. I have 4 factors of b, 3 factors of b, and 8 factors of b. So I'm going to need 3 of them. He's the one with the smallest exponent. So there's your GCF. The GCF is 8 to the 6th power times b cubed. So what you can do now is you're going to rewrite this polynomial as the GCF, a to the 6th, b to the cube, b to the 3rd power, times a polynomial that will give us this back. So a to the 6th times a to the 5th is a to the 11th. Kind of makes sense because when you multiply like bases, you add exponents. 6 plus 5 is 11. B to the 3rd power times b to the 1st power is b to the 4th. Minus 5, because that's a 1 right here. 1 times -5 is -5. A to the 6th times a to the 3rd is a to the 9th. B to the 3rd, see that's b to the 3rd here? I'm factoring all of it out, so I don't have any b's as factors right here. Plus 7, I have a to the 6th here. I factored all of the a to the 6's out, so there's no a's that appear here as factors. I have 8 factors of b here. I'm only taking out 3 of them, so I need 5 factors of b here. And so there's the answer. Okay, number 2, we have x to the 3rd power minus 8x squared minus 3x plus 24. Okay, so what you got to remember about this one is that you have 4 terms for this polynomial. And when we have 4 terms, we want to try by grouping. But before we do that, make sure you look at the GCF first. So the GCF of all of these terms is 1. All right, so I'm not going to factor out a GCF like I did in number 1. Now, I do have 4 terms, so we're going to group these. So let's group the first 2 and the last 2 and see what happens. In the first group, I can factor out an x squared. So when I factor out an x squared, I get x squared times x is x cubed minus x squared times 8 is 8x squared. In the second group, I can, remember, that subtraction, you must factor out a negative GCF. So the GCF of the second group is a -3. So I'm going to factor out a -3. A -3 times x is a -3x. A -3 times a -8 is a +24. If this is factorable by grouping, you will notice that what's inside the parentheses will be the same. So now what you're going to do is you're going to factor out the x minus 8. So I get x minus 8 times, and I'm left with, see, when you factor out the x minus 8, you're left with x squared. And then minus 3. And so there's your answer. Okay, number 3, we have x squared plus 5xy minus 24y squared. Okay, so number 3, the GCF again is 1, but this time I have 2 variables, so you got to be careful. Some students forget about those 2 variables. So I'm going to go directly to the 2 binomials. The only possibility for x squared is x times x. Now for 24, and really this is negative, there are several possibilities, but remember if the last sign's negative, one's positive, one's negative, okay? Now remember, you got to always check to make sure you get that middle term, 5xy. So whatever you put as your last terms, you need to check the out and the inner to make sure you get this, the 5xy. So what's going to work looks like it's going to be 8 and 3. So let's put, and the 8 will go here. So let's put 8y. Don't forget about the y. See, that's a y here, and 3y here. All right, now always check. Always check. So make sure whatever you put right here, you check. It's easy to check. If you don't get this back, then something's wrong with what you have. So if I look at the first, x times x is x squared, so that's what I wanted. The last, 8y times a negative 3y is a negative 24y squared. Now let's do the outer and the inner. The outer, x times negative 3y is a negative 3xy. The inner, 8y times x is a positive 8xy. I'm going to add them up. I get 5xy, and that's what you wanted. So this is the answer to number 3. Number 4, we have 3a squared plus 6a minus 72. So 3a squared plus 6a minus 72. Now again, you got to look for the GCF first. So the GCF in this case is 3. 3 is the largest factor that goes into 3, 6, and negative 72. So the GCF is 3. So since the GCF is something other than 1, we're going to factor it out. So I get 3 times a squared. So 3 times a squared is 3a squared. 3 times 2a is 6a. And then 3 times a negative 24 is a negative 72. Now remember, that's not your final answer. You need to check and see if this trinomial can be factored further. All right, so let's go off to the side and see if I can do that any further. Now again, you see the GCF here is 1, so that means what you did previously is correct. The GCF is 3, you factored out, and you have this now. So when you factor this, you get a times a is a squared. The last sign is negative, so one's positive, one's negative. And what's going to work will be 6 and 4 this time. So let's put 6 here, 4 here, and always check this. A times a is a squared. A positive 4 times a negative 6 is negative 24. The outer is negative 4a. The inner is 6a. When you add them up, you get 2a, and that's what you wanted. So that goes here. Now, that's not the answer, because remember, this is a factorization for this. That was not the problem. This was the problem. So don't forget about your 3. So the answer is 3 times a plus 6 times a minus 4. All right, number 5. So let's do number 5. Number 5, we have 2w squared plus 5w plus 15. All right, so the GCF is 1. So let's go ahead and do the two binomials and see what we get. The only possibility for 2w squared is 2w and w times w. The last sign is positive, so that means these signs will be the same, and they're both going to be the middle sign. And I need two numbers whose product is 15, so like 5 and 3 and 15 and 1. So if you try 3 and 5 like this, you always check because you want to make sure you get that 5w, and you'll notice that when you do the outer, that's 10w. When you do the inner, that's 3w. And when you add them up, you get 13w. So that did not work. If you switch them, like let's say 2w plus 5 times w plus 3 instead, do the same thing. The outer is 6w. The inner is 5w. You get 11w. That didn't work. And you may say, all right, well, let's try 15 and 1. Yeah, but think about it. If this is 2w and this is w, no matter where you put the 15, that's not going to work, right? If you put the 15 here, the 1 there, or if you put the 15 here, the 1 there, you're never going to get, for the out and the inner, you will never get 5w. All right, so you never get 5w. So what that means is that this right here is prime. So that's prime. All right. Number 6, we have 12x squared minus 23x plus 10. 12, that's a 10 here. So 12x squared plus 23x plus 10. So the GCF is 1. And so let's go and do the two binomials. And for 12x squared, let's try 4x and 3x. Let's try that first. It may not work. It may be 6x and 2x that works. Or it may be 12x and x. For 10, see the last sign's positive, so that means these signs in here are the same. So when the last sign's positive, that's always easy to deal with the signs. And so it's going to be this middle sign. So these both have to be subtractions. For 10, let's try 5 and 2. Now remember, I cannot put the 2 here. You know where to put the 5 and the 2. Because if you put the 2 here, that means you can factor out a 2, which means that all these are divisible by 2, and that's not true. The GCF here was 1. Okay? So that means I got to put the 5 here and the 2 there. So let's see if that's true. 4x times 3x is 12x squared. A negative 5 times a negative 2 is a positive 10. Now let's do the outer and the inner. The outer, 4x times a negative 2 is a negative 8x. The inner, negative 5 times 3x is a negative 15x. And when I add them up, I get a negative 23x. And that's what you wanted. So that's the answer. All right, number 7, we have 25v squared minus 30v plus 9. Okay, so again, the GCF is 1. So let's go directly to those two binomials. And for 25v, let's try 5v and 5v. So 5v times 5v is 25v squared. Again, look, the last sign's positive. That's a good thing. It'd be the middle sign, so they're both negatives. So you're looking at subtraction. For 9, let's try 3 and 3. And so notice I get 5v times 5v is 25v squared. A negative 3 times a negative 3 is a positive 9. The outer, let me go ahead and do that here. 5v minus 3 times 5v minus 3. The outer is a negative 15v. The inner is a negative 15v. When you add them up, you get a negative 30v, and that's what you wanted. What I want you to notice also is this. There was a lesson that you learned that talked about the perfect square trinomial. Perfect square trinomial. And I want you to notice that some of you may have recognized right away that this is a perfect square trinomial. Because watch. You see how this 25v squared is a perfect square? So in other words, I can write 25v squared as 5v to the second power. And you see this plus 9? I can write that as 3 to the second power, right? And then you see this negative 30v. Remember we talked about that? That 30 right here is even. So that means I can write this as 2 times 15v. So you see this 15v right here? 5v times 3v is 15v. And so whenever that occurs, whenever the first term is a perfect square, whenever the last term is a perfect square, and what you have inside this parentheses multiplied together and then times 2 gives you this back, then that means that when you factor it, these two factors are the same, which means this is a perfect square trinomial. Okay? So in other words, you could have written it as 5v minus 3 squared. Okay, so I just wanted to remind you about the perfect square trinomial that you learned in a lesson. Let's look at number 8. Number 8, you have 6c squared minus 24. All right, so I want you to notice that the GCF is 6. GCF is 6. So if I factor that out, I get 6 times c squared minus 4. Now what you got to recognize is this right here is a difference of two squares. So I can factor this further. I can factor this as 6 times c minus 2 times c plus 2. Number 9. Number 9, we have b cubed minus 27. So what you got to notice here is that this is the difference of two cubes. So in other words, I can fill in these parentheses. B times itself 3 times is b cubed. 3 times itself 3 times is 27. 3 times 3 times 3. So this is your first, and this is your last. So remember our formula, f cubed minus l cubed, the difference of two cubes. So remember it's a binomial times a trinomial. F squared plus fl plus l squared. So that's your formula. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to take F and you're going to take L and you're going to substitute into this formula. So the answer is going to be F minus L, so B minus 3 times F squared, so B times B, which is B squared, plus the product, product of F and L, so B and 3 is 3B, plus the last squared, so 3 times 3 is 9. So that's the answer. Okay, number 10, you have 64x cubed plus 125a cubed. Okay, so again, the GCF is 1, but this is the sum of two cubes. And I know this is going to be the sum of two cubes because I can fill in these parentheses. This right here is a perfect cube. This is a perfect cube. For 64x cubed, 4x times itself 3 times is 64x cubed. For 125a cubed, 5a times itself 3 times is 125a cubed. So this is your F, this is your L. And so now remember the formula for the sum of two cubes, so F cubed plus L cubed is the binomial F plus L times the trinomial F squared minus FL plus L squared. All right, and so all you do is just take your F and your L and you substitute into your formula. So the answer is going to be the binomial F plus L, so that's 4x plus 5a. And then times, and then remember the F squared means F times F. So F here is 4x, so that means 4x times 4x, which is 16x squared. So that goes here. Minus F times L. So let's go by what F times L is. So F times L is 4x times 5a. Well, 4 times 5 is 20, so that's 20ax or 20xa, does not matter. Okay, and then plus, and then L squared means L times L. Well, L is 5a, so that means 5a times 5a, which is 25a squared. So that goes here. And so there's your answer. That is number 10. So that is the key to the worksheet on number 5, work factory number 5, and that was topic 9. Okay.